Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Amy Dehan. I am Curator of Decorative Arts and Design at the Cincinnati Art Museum, and I am honored to serve as President of the Decorative Arts Society, Inc. And I thank you all for joining us here for this lovely celebration. The Decorative Arts Society mission is to encourage the appreciation of decorative arts as a community of museum professionals, academics, collectors, art dealers, and decorative arts enthusiasts. We support exceptional programming, the annual Scholarly Publication Awards, and share information and resources relative to the field in our newsletter. A special note that you all will be receiving an invitation to an upcoming event on Thursday, December 4th at 2 p.m., where Decorative Arts Society contributors will be welcomed on a tour by Amy Hopwood at the Newark Museum, a tour of the Ballantine House and the galleries. So look for that coming soon. I'd like to take a brief moment to recognize members of our volunteer board who are with us tonight. And if each of you could just kind of stand or wave your hand so we can recognize you. Emily Kroll, who is our treasurer. Maura Ferguson, our secretary. Medill Higgins Harvey, our publication awards chair. Anna D'Ambrosio, I don't think I see her yet. Karen Zukowski, she may not be here either, our website chair. Margie Hofer, our program co-chair. And Judith Hernstadt, who with Will Roseman offered us this evening's venue. So thank you to Judith and to Margie and her co-chair Liz St. George, who prepared this wonderful evening for us. Along with Meg Caldwell and Maria Yeye, who could not be here with us tonight, this board works tirelessly to bring you exemplary, connective experiences. So I just wanted to give them a round of applause for all of their efforts. And if there's anyone here tonight that's interested in joining all of the lovely people I've just introduced and serving on our board, please reach out to us. It's a wonderful group of people working in service of our love for the decorative arts field. To keep this organization now in its 35th year flourishing, I ask that you not only respond to our recent annual appeal, and complete our participation survey, but also ask you to commit to invite a friend to join us at a Decorative Arts Society event this year. As we grow our community, more opportunities for study, travel, and fellowship will follow. Tonight's program will include the presentation of our annual publication awards and our Service to the Profession Awards, followed by a presentation on an exciting new project afoot at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Please join me in welcoming Medill Higgins Harvey, board member and awards chair, to the podium.
Thanks, Amy. Before presenting the awards, I want to acknowledge and thank the members of the Charles F. Montgomery Prize and Award Committee and the Robert C. Smith Award Committee for their thoughtful and rigorous review of the numerous publications that were considered for the 2024 Decorative Arts Society prizes. The Montgomery Prize and Award Committee, chaired by Remy Dill, included Anna D'Ambrosio, Philippe Halbert, Leah Lane, Barbara Veith, and Jerry Ward. And the Smith Award Committee, chaired by Ann Glasscock, was made up of Adam Irby, Janine Felino, Marissa Hirschon, and Jeannie Selensky. Those of you who are in the room, please wave a hand. We're here tonight thanks to your willingness to give of your time and talents, and we're profoundly grateful. And on to the awards. The Charles F. Montgomery Prize is presented to the most distinguished contribution to the study of American decorative arts published in the English language by a North American scholar in a given year. The 2024 recipient is Women Enterprise Craft, Chicago's Atlan Ceramic Art Club, 1893 to 1923, written by Sharon S. Darling. This revelatory publication explores the history of the Atlan Ceramic Art Club, one of the leading China painting studios of the day. Club members skillfully and inventively combined abstracted natural and floral ornament with modern porcelain shapes, a radical idea at the time. Darling has engagingly brought these women out of the shadows, shining new light on their pioneering work. And although Sharon couldn't be here tonight, her niece has graciously agreed to come and accept the award.
I am not Sharon, I'm Karen, Sharon Darling's niece, Karen Darling. She wrote a few words, so I wanted to share them with you all tonight, literally verbatim. I am deeply honored to receive the 2024 Charles F. Montgomery Prize for Women Enterprise Craft, Chicago's Atlan Ceramic Art Club, 1893 to 1923, from the Decorative Arts Society. This award is especially meaningful to me. The story of the women who painted China as members of the Atlan Club was a 50-year labor of love. I was introduced to the Atlan Club in 1973 when I cataloged a small collection of ceramics by longtime member Helen Frazee that had been donated to the Chicago History Museum. At the time, information about the Atlan Club was minimal. What I did find intrigued me to the point that I continued to collect information about the club and its members long after I left the Chicago History Museum. I was fascinated by the biographies of the Atlan women, who not only pioneered a new decorative style, but managed to support themselves as independent artists. The advent of digitized resources made researching the Atlans a rewarding hobby and eventually a book. It's especially rewarding to be recognized by a group of peers who share my love of decorative arts. Thank you all.
You're gonna make it so I'm not a disembodied voice. Exactly. With now, yeah. I tried standing on my toes. I can't do it long enough. Will do. Can you hear me, if not see me? Does that work? You want me closer? Okay. Lots of feedback in my ear, but good? Okay. So now on to the Charles F. Montgomery Award, which honors the scholar whose first major publication in the field of North American decorative arts is judged the most outstanding such work published in a given year. The 2024 winner is Edward Duffield, Philadelphia clockmaker, citizen, gentleman, 1730 to 1803, written by Bob Frischman. The book catalogs and describes 71 known Duffield clocks and instruments, revealing that during the mid-18th century, such timepieces were rarely fabricated entirely from scratch by isolated individuals. Instead, Frischman argues that Duffield and his contemporaries were skilled mechanical artisans who crafted complex metal mechanisms that rang the hours and steadily ticked inside wooden cases typically made by others. So, Bob, would you like to come receive your award?
Thank you. I brought one book. As you can see, they're doorstops, so I couldn't bring one for everyone. But it's possible I can gift this to someone who feels they're most deserving, perhaps. And I have decided, instead of winging it as I usually do, I will read this. Thank you. 6 evenings ago in London, I stood at a podium in the Great Court of the British Museum. I delivered the 36th annual Dingwall Below Lecture, one of horology's most prestigious events. This represented for me a culmination of my 45 years as a practitioner and scholar of horology, the science of timekeeping. This evening is another culmination of my passion for the history, technology, and cultural significance of the ticking timepieces that first appeared in our Western civilization more than 8 centuries ago. My biography of Philadelphia clockmaker Edward Duffield allowed me to focus my interests and expertise on a gentleman artisan who lived and worked in colonial and federal Philadelphia during 7 crucial decades in our nation's history. Much more important, my book elevated to a new level my mission of promoting greater understanding of American clockmaking by collectors, curators, and the general public. I'm grateful to the Decorative Arts Society that my book has earned the Charles F. Montgomery Award. I long have admired his many contributions to the world of American decorative arts. I'm honored that I and my book now are associated with his enduring legacy. Thank you.
So now for the Robert C. Smith Award, which recognizes the best article or essay in the field of decorative arts published in English in a given year. The 2024 winning essay is Origins and Evolution of the Early American Oyster Jar by Chris Pickerel, published in Ceramics in America. Pickerel unpacks and tells a captivating story of the oyster jar, a seemingly unassuming clay object. From trade routes to foodways to underwater exploration, the interdisciplinary nature of the article engages readers and keeps them yearning to learn more. Chris.
Unlike the previous speaker, I'm going to wing this one. Sorry about that. I'm very honored to be here tonight, so thank you to the Society as well as the committee that chose my article. I wanted to acknowledge the incredible work of Ron Fuchs, the editor of Ceramics in America, who was key to the success of this article. What started out as a very dense and long draft was soon brought down to a very brief version. And then over time, he allowed me, and we did it together, to add those pieces back into it. So I think in the end, we came up with something that worked pretty well. So thank you for that, Ron. Really do appreciate that. I also want to acknowledge my wife, who's got the patience to allow me to do the research and the writing as a second job, not my first job. And just want to say that who would have thought that the offer of 2 unassuming little ceramic jars from a stranger 3,000 miles away in South America on Facebook, of all places, would start me on this journey that brought me here today, but that's how it happened. So thank you, appreciate it.
And we're going to conclude with sharing with you that the Montgomery Prize Committee also gave an honorable mention to The Crafted World of Wharton Esherick, written by Sarah Archer, Colin Fanning, Anne Glasscock, Holly Gore, and Emily Zilber. Esherick was a pivotal figure in the 20th century American art, craft, and design. His home and studio on Valley Forge Mountain, now the Wharton Esherick Museum, served as his creative epicenter and a vibrant community hub. The book introduces Esherick's work to the public by drawing on the museum's collection of nearly 3,000 objects, including furniture, architectural elements, prints, drawings, and sculpture. And so we have letters for all of those authors, which we will distribute. And I will pass the microphone back to Amy.
Tonight I am pleased to present 2 Service to the Profession Awards. The Decorative Arts Society established its Service to the Profession Awards in 2005. Thank you. This honor is given from time to time in recognition of outstanding contributions to the field of decorative arts. Past recipients have included Ulysses Dietz, retired curator of decorative arts at the Newark Museum of Art, and authors Thomas and Alice Kugelman. Tonight's first award goes to David H. Bernstein and Debevoise and Plimpton for their voluntary and extremely generous contribution of time and expertise to uphold the integrity of the Decorative Art Society's trademark. David. Thank you, David. The second goes to our very own Stuart Rosenblum in recognition of his more than 35 years of commitment and service to this organization. Stuart recently retired from the board after serving for decades as our treasurer, and I know you will all agree that it is difficult to quantify the many, many contributions that Stuart has made to this organization and its vitality over the years. While we will miss his leadership, we look forward to his continued presence and support. Thank you, Stuart. If you could please come to the podium.
The best part of this award is that it gives me a chance to personally thank all of those who have made this evening possible over the last 50 years of the organization's history. 35 as the Decorative Arts Society incorporated in New York, which I was pleased to do the legal work to accomplish, and the predecessor organizations, the chapter of the Society of Architectural Historians, and a Delaware corporation. What strikes me over the years is the privilege that it's been to get to know all the curators and supporters of the decorative arts, the professionalism that the curators exhibit, the generosity with which they have led us around their exhibitions, examined historical sites with us. It's been extraordinary what they do for those interested and their own colleagues. And for the supporters at all different levels, particularly those who have been consistent supporters and those who have never been thanked. We did write letters as required by the IRS for those at a certain level and above. But the extraordinary thing is an organization that has existed for 50 years, and to the best of my knowledge, those under that required level never received a written thank you, and almost never asked for one, and continue to support us. That is truly extraordinary. So for all those contributions, people in the field helping us plan things, it's been great. And those who've been financial supporters and those who've come on our tours. We wouldn't have been able to do it without those who routinely came. Some of them are sitting right here, and I'm looking at them, and that was greatly appreciated. And the chance to mentor people that I also enjoyed, have them grow in their profession and give them a sense of what was involved in the business aspects, the planning aspects, touring aspects, was indeed a privilege. So for all those privileges, I thank you.
Just a note, in further recognition of Stuart's service, the board has established the Stuart Rosenblum Fund, which will go towards key initiatives to secure the society's sustainability and relevance for the next 35 years. So should you wish to contribute in honor of Stuart's longtime commitment to this organization, you may send a check to our treasurer, Emily Kroll, or you can use our new online payment system on our website, and which we're quite proud of launching just days ago. You can either email Emily and let her know you're sending that and you want it designated to the Stuart Rosenblum Fund, or where it says your interest in decorative arts, you can put Stuart Rosenblum Fund. So thank you. Let me welcome Margie Hofer to the podium to introduce tonight's speakers.
Good evening, everyone. It's my honor to introduce our speakers tonight. David Barquist hardly needs introduction. He's had a distinguished career in American decorative arts, and his scholarship has guided and inspired many others in the field, myself included. David is the H. Richard Dietrich Jr. Curator of American Decorative Arts at the Philadelphia Art Museum. I'm going to use that rebrand, a position he has held since 2004. Prior to the PMA, he spent more than 20 years as a curator of American Decorative Arts at the Yale University Art Gallery. His publications and exhibitions include American Tables and Looking Glasses in the Mabel Brady Garvin and other collections at Yale University, Meyer Myers, Jewish silversmith in colonial New York, Setting the President's Table, American Presidential China from the Robert L. McNeil Jr. Collection at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and American Silver in the Philadelphia Museum of Art, Volume 1. He's currently working on Volume 2 of the Silver Catalog, due out in 2027. Importantly for this gathering, David served as president of the Decorative Arts Society from 2006 to 2016. And his book on American tables and looking glasses was awarded the Decorative Arts Society's Charles F. Montgomery Prize in 1993. Colin Fanning is assistant curator of European decorative arts at the Philadelphia Art Museum. His work spans a broad range of design, craft, and architecture from the mid-19th century to the present. He received an MA in Design History from Bard Graduate Center, where he's completing a dissertation on American design education in the late 20th century. In addition to prior roles as curatorial fellow and a consulting curator with PMA, he has worked at the Denver Art Museum, the Museum of Arts and Design, and the American Federation of Arts. His PMA exhibitions have included Dieter Rahm's Principled Design, Designs for Different Futures, Firing the Imagination, Japanese Influence in French Ceramics, 1860 to 1910, and Naoto Fukusawa, Things in Themselves. David and Colin are speaking to us this evening about their jointly curated exhibition and publication, Workshop of the World, Arts and Crafts in Philadelphia, which opens at the PMA in July 2026. Please welcome our speakers.
Yes, now the dramatic moment of the screen. I'm told I need to speak into the mic. Is that correct? You can hear me better. All right. Well, thank you, Margie, and thanks to the Decorative Arts Society for inviting us here tonight. We're delighted to share just a brief overview of the exhibition that Colin and I have been working on for a couple of years now. It's kind of a rapidly assembled exhibition compared to some, but it's been very gratifying that we've had nothing but terrific positive responses from everyone we've contacted about lending objects to the show. So we're very excited about that. And I will just say that since museums love anniversaries, the reason we're doing this show in 2026 is it's not only the semi-quincentenary of the United States, but it's also the Philadelphia Art Museum's 150th anniversary, because we were founded at the time of the Centennial Exposition. And Colin will begin by giving us a bit of an overview of that.
Yes, thanks, David, and thank you, everyone, for being here tonight, and to the Decorative Arts Society for the great invitation. As David mentioned, we're starting this exhibition in 1876, obviously a kind of banner year for so many topics in the history of art, of decorative arts, of design, of industry, and the Centennial Exposition, as many of you probably know, was this kind of watershed moment for the decorative arts and industrial arts in the United States. hosted in Philadelphia in Fairmount Park over a fairgrounds of about 280 acres across 200 plus buildings that were assembled over the course of 18 months. This was a massive statement of the United States' sort of arrival on the world stage in the moment, post-Civil War, really as a way of projecting this kind of confident, forward-looking national identity. And the scale of the event, is impressive. We can run through all of those superlatives, 10 million visitors over 6 months. But what really interests us for the purposes of this exhibition is how it acts as a vehicle or a kind of vector for many of the ideas of design reform that are currently circulating in Britain, especially at this moment in 1876. And it serves as the kind of conduit for many of those debates around the kind of purpose and responsibility of design and of ornament and so on into the United States and into Philadelphia specifically, which is obviously relevant as one of the major manufacturing centers of the United States at this time. And as with so many World's Fairs, this is a kind of wonderful site for examining the material culture of kind of international competition in various ways, whether in the dimensions of technological innovation or industrial capacity, economic strength, and so on. It's this kind of proving ground for different nations and a way of projecting their ambitions in both matters artistic and economic. And so in the kind of opening chapter of our exhibition, we'll really look at how the decorative arts played a key role in this kind of international jockeying. And on the level of things like the kind of material culture produced out of the centennial, like this wonderful souvenir handkerchief that in our collection. But also a chance to really think through some other aspects of these exhibitions that I think sometimes get downplayed in the kind of art historical scholarship of World's Fairs. So we're showing here a model of the massive coreless steam engine that was at the center of Machinery Hall in the Centennial and was one of the most commented upon, most kind of iconic objects in the fair. And I think we have a nice opportunity to really, while looking at many of the exhibits in kind of more conventional media, ceramics and furniture and so on, which I'll get to in a second, it's also a really nice moment to kind of put a little pressure on what we tend to reject as the industrial. If we're thinking about arts and crafts as a kind of response to industrialization, how can we kind of use this show and publication as an opportunity to bring industry into the frame again, not just as this sort of invisible specter in the background? So thinking through how machinery at the Centennial was in many ways an object of aesthetic contemplation, aesthetic response. You read in a lot of the coverage around the Centennial how people really had affective relationships to machinery, and certainly for the United States, it was one of the arenas in which American producers and industrialists were seen to really excel and have a kind of higher ground. That was not so much the case in other categories of the industrial or decorative arts, where European and East Asian, especially manufacturers and makers, were seen as really kind of bringing the best of the best. And this, of course, inspired a lot of soul searching on the part of American artisans and makers. So we will look at some of the ways in which this plays out, the kind of massive range of historic revival decorative arts, Renaissance revival, Gothic revival, neoclassicism, and so on, and how those historic styles were used as a way of kind of claiming craft excellence in contemporary terms. So everything from this wonderful Worcester porcelain ewer and stand, with decoration mimicking Limoges enamels, to then the kind of counterpart, thinking about the Centennial as a space of true cross-cultural encounter and the ways that objects from Japan and China, and really especially Japan, really were a kind of wake-up call for a lot of viewers from the American audience. And so some of the objects here are really the museum's first acquisitions. We were founded out of the Centennial, which David will speak about a little more specifically in a moment. And these things just kind of were purchased straight out of the stands, more or less. And with this idea that these objects in this collection would become a kind of teaching tool to inform contemporary manufacture. And it's not just historicizing, it's not just the kind of Orientalism that people developed around their modes of looking and consuming at the fair, but also thinking through production techniques and how the idea of novelty and industrial innovation were really key to this space of the fair. So everything from bentwood furniture by the Tonnant brothers to some really wonderful machine-cut veneers being applied by furniture maker George Ahrens based in Illinois. And this is a very recent acquisition on the part of my colleagues in the American Art Department. So it's just a kind of wonderful chance to unpick the Centennial as a space of encounter for these kind of wonderful things, these objects of high aesthetic intentionality, but also true material and technical innovation and excellence. And then that leads into our second chapter, which relates more specifically to our institution's own history.
Yes, as Colin said, the Centennial was really seen even before the fair opened as a catalyst for improving art education in the United States, and specifically in Philadelphia. The idea was based very much on the model of the South Kensington Museum in London, which, as I think everyone knows, grew out of the great exhibition of 1851 in London. The parallels were very obvious to the folks in Philadelphia in 1876 that this was Philadelphia's chance to create their own South Kensington Museum. And so the Pennsylvania Museum and School of Industrial Art were founded in 1876 after the Centennial closed. And the Centennial Fair, as Colin's already shown you, served as a kind of marketplace for the new museum to acquire objects that they felt would be useful for teaching good design to designers and workers. So there was very much a kind of paternalistic noblesse oblige idea in this creation of this institution. And these are just two, and I will also say that then as now, the museum board was very assiduous in cultivating gifts from exhibitors at the Centennial as well. So you see here both something that was acquired for the museum, a piece of contemporary Japanese ceramic, but also many of the industrial exhibitors were solicited to provide the new fledgling museum with examples of their work. And they weren't looking for artistic masterpieces. They were looking for things that could be useful to designers and makers in the city of Philadelphia. That's not to say, however, that they didn't also have there's a kind of tension in that they also felt as an art museum they needed to show high art. Since their budgets were somewhat limited, they, like many American museums in the 1870s and 1880s, acquired reproductions. And one of the most extraordinary finds we've made in the museum's storerooms is this full-size photographic reproduction of the Bayeux Tapestry that was purchased by the museum in the 1880s, hand-colored, which has slumbered for most of the 20th century in storage. And we're bringing out a small section of it because it's the entire tapestry. Of course, the textile industry in Philadelphia was huge, so anything relating to textiles was considered very important. And it's interesting that the museum and the school were a single institution, unlike the South Kensington Museum, which was very separate from London's National Art School, which today is the Royal College of Art. They certainly intersected, but they were administratively two separate institutions. In Philadelphia, they were one. And also, interestingly, they were never in the same place. The museum moved into Memorial Hall, which you saw at the center of the handkerchief earlier, and the school had a kind of peripatetic existence. It was always the poorer sibling of the duo, and until they moved into this building at the corner of Broad and Pine Streets in 1893, formerly a deaf and dumb asylum. And it's actually where they stayed for the rest of their history. And as I'm sure many of you in the room know, The successor institution to the school, which separated from the museum after the Second World War, was the University of the Arts in Philadelphia, which sadly went closed last year. And I'm showing you the Aikens portrait is of the long-serving principal of the school, essentially the president of the school, Leslie Miller. In its early years, the school was very focused on industrial instruction and training of people in industry, especially the textile division again. Another wonderful discovery we made are the student notebooks of someone who will meet later as an arts and crafts individual. But when he was a young student, he was training to work in the industrial textile production. And these are the notebooks where he has all his exercises and learns to what fibers are the best for certain kinds of fabrics, how to dye them, and then records the weaving patterns that you can see in that sort of graph paper thing at the bottom of the right page. And the school was very good at self-promotion. They showed in fairs, including the World's Columbian Exposition, where this amazing jacquard woven portiere was shown in 1893. In the mid-1890s, however, there's a shift in both the museum and the school away from industry and towards aesthetics or handicraft. And part of that has to do with a professionalization of the museum staff. The first curators who actually are knowledgeable about their subject are hired, like Edwin Atlee Barber, who, for anyone interested in ceramics, is a name well known. And they started to acquire not good models for mass production, but instead artistic masterpieces like Susan Frackleton's olive jar, which was described by no less a person than Candace Wheeler as the finest piece of ceramic at the World's Columbian Exposition. And similarly, the school shifted away from design for industry towards handicraft. And so a course in ceramics is started with Leon Volkmar as the potter, and a course in wrought iron is started with no less a figure than Samuel Yellen as the instructor. And these are training students not to make things that are to be produced in factories, but making one-off unique objects. And that's a shift that you see in the arts and crafts movement in general, but very specifically at the Pennsylvania Museum and School.
And I will duck back in briefly for a kind of interlude. We'll have a small section within this discussion about the school and the exhibition about how these ideas also started to play out in Philadelphia industries themselves. And in particular, how makers that are not truly devoted to the kind of ideals of handicraft that are starting to be articulated at the school, but how these makers are starting to learn from and in some ways appropriate the kind of lessons of arts and crafts that are being read by many of the makers and teachers and students at the school. So just two kind of quick examples to illustrate that. One is a pre-conservation treatment photograph of a Morris chair, a reclining armchair by the Philadelphia firm Allen & Brother, who are considered one of the kind of high-end, really most notable, most significant furniture firms in Philadelphia in the later 19th century. But their other work, if you know Allen & Brother and have seen things that they've shown, for example, at the Centennial, this will look quite interesting to you because much of their work is this sort of florid neo-Renaissance, very elaborate, very heavy. But here they are copying a chair produced by Morris & Company, designed and produced in Britain. And we have the cushions are being fabricated more or less as we speak. They will be beautiful. We will get the photography in time for the catalog. I'm speaking this into existence. But it's really, I think, instructive to see that manufacturers in Philadelphia are paying attention to these shifts and these discourses as they're circulating within the space of design education. The publishing industry is another, I think, really wonderful and instructive example. And of course, Philadelphia is a major center for publishing in the 19th century, both with a house like Lippincott or the Curtis Publishing Company. And we're interested in how these companies and their output really, again, act as these kind of fora or these vehicles for the aesthetic lessons of arts and crafts. So the kind of wonderful literary magazine posters that Lippincott produces with these flat kind of woodblock-like aesthetics, even though they're lithographs, are very much participating in this kind of art aesthetic shift away from elaborate revival styles and towards the kind of simplicity and honesty that we tend to think of as associated with the arts and crafts movement. And we'll have, the textile story will be a part of this as well in the exhibition, but to really turn towards the kind of heart of the show and the what we see as really the kind of true maturation of arts and crafts in Philadelphia will be the subject of the next two sections, David.
Right. So, as I said, the school has shifted towards handicraft, away from industry, at least in the art section of the school, as opposed to the textile section. And that really, many of the figures that we'll be looking at in the next few minutes were either students of the school or teachers or both. And of course, one of the great teachers there was Samuel Yellen. And his work, of course, and of course, I think everyone in this room is probably aware there's a major new study by Joe Cunningham, who's here, on Samuel Yellen, that if you haven't seen it, it is truly a breathtaking tribute to him as one of the leading figures of the American arts and crafts movement. But he really exemplifies the idea of the master's hand, the hand of the artist showing in their work that was so prized by Ruskin and Morris. And there's this wonderful film that was made by the Metropolitan Museum, which shows Yellen making a demonstration piece, which we will be lucky enough to have in the exhibition, the demonstration piece itself, which you see on the right hand of the screen. Another tenet of the arts and crafts movement that you see permeating the work of artists in the area is the idea of truth to materials, and especially in the ceramics made at the Moravian Pottery and Tile Works or the Enfield Pottery and Tile Works. There's this celebration of local red clay, and that comes out in pieces like the Enfield tile on the left, where the glaze is selectively applied, and you get to see some of the red clay show. The main design is actually rendered in the red clay. Or Mercer's amazing this mosaic of Powhatan's Council, where the glaze on the tile is actually smoked on, so that it kind of creates this rugged, earthy kind of quality to it that again reinforces its origins in local clay. And again, following the ideas of Ruskin and Morris, one, I think, reason Philadelphia hasn't gotten the same kind of attention that, say, Chicago or California has is that many of the artists revered the Gothic style, the medieval style that was so beloved of Ruskin and Morris. And certainly you're going to see some wonderful examples of their work, like the amazing Gothic chest that Yellen made for his own use, which the museum itself exhibited, the then Pennsylvania Museum exhibited in 1922 in an American Handicraft exhibition, or this casket that was designed for their presentation of the Philadelphia Award by Violet Oakley and made by a professor at the museum school. Stained glass, of course, was a medium that immediately conjures up the Middle Ages, and there were amazing stained glass firms in Philadelphia, DeCenzo Studios. Nicola DeCenzo, both a graduate of the school and a teacher there, before he founds a studio that supplied stained glass all over the country. And Violet Oakley, again, an artist who's best known as a mural painter, but she did many stained glass designs early in her career, and we're lucky to have these full-size cartoons for a pair of windows that were made for a church in Germantown. But the Middle Ages wasn't the only pre-industrial model that these artists revered. Early America was another. Mercer, especially, for those of you familiar with his work, as you know, loved the local Pennsylvania German pottery that you found in Bucks County, and he made some attempts to replicate that in his work. So he collected the 18th century cup on the left and then tried to make versions of it as the Pennsylvania drinking cup of 1793. Unfortunately, the local clays didn't lend themselves to being molded, which is the way that the Mercer piece is made. It's molded and glazed rather than thrown and then has graffito decoration as the original did. So it's not a common part of his work. And one aspect of the movement that I just want to touch on for a second is the fact that these artists, particularly the ones based in Philadelphia, very much worked together on different commissions. And that has to do with the generation of younger architects who were in a group called the T-Square Club, who would bring together people like Edward Main and Samuel Yellen or Hollingsworth Pierce to work on different commissions, particularly ecclesiastical commissions are very important for the arts and crafts movement in Philadelphia, which again ties in to the whole medievalism idea, although at the Washington Memorial Chapel in Valley Forge, you have this amazing mashup of early America and the Gothic in the ornament of the building. Another aspect of the arts and crafts movement in Philadelphia that's different from other places, or at least it's a lot bigger part of the movement in Philadelphia, are craft communities that are formed outside the city in rural locations, following on the model of William Morris's News from Nowhere. The best known is probably Rose Valley in Delaware County, which had workshops that were headed by professional artists recruited for the Rose Valley workshops. John Main, the nephew of Edward Main, headed the woodworking shop, and William Percival Jarvis, who was an British potter, immigrant potter, headed the short-lived Rose Valley pottery. It was a very different place from the Arden colony, which was in the state of Delaware, just over the line from Chester County, which was a single tax community founded on Georgist economic principles, where the residents were expected to take up the arts, even if they were untrained. So Don Stevens, who was the son of one of the founders of Arden, created this very Stickley-esque sideboard as just an amateur woodworker, and similarly Margaret Wood took up silversmithing and created this pitcher. Another center then, as now, for the arts in a rural location, very rural in the 1910s and 20s, was New Hope in Bucks County. You have Violet Oakley's portrait of Ethel and Donald Davenport, the weavers of New Hope, where she's displaying one of their hand weavings. Don Davenport is the fellow who kept those student notebooks, worked for several years in textile industry, and then saw the light and decided to become a hand weaver. So he's one of our arts and crafts heroes. Similarly, Morgan Colt, who was an architect here in New York, traveled to Bucks County, fell in love with the beautiful scenery, and decided to give up architecture and instead work in furniture and metalsmithing. And the last of our local communities is Brenathan, and it's an amazing story of neo-medieval workshops that were set up in the town of Brenathan to build the Swedenborgian cathedral that's there, funded by the fortune of the Pitcairn family of the Pittsburgh Plate Glass Company. And Raymond Pitcairn was simply devoted to the idea of doing it the hard way. So they recreated the recipes for 14th century French stained glass. Everything like this crib was made by hand. There was no machinery. It was all done, as I said, the hard way. With very skilled artisans doing it. Lawrence Saint, for example, was a highly skilled stained glass artist who was recruited to work there. So each community was a slightly different story, and that's part of the narrative we have.
And as David briefly alluded, in the case of Bryn Athyn, which is this kind of wonderful fantasia, medieval fantasia that's all rooted in industrial money. That's the case for many of these communities, right? That they are fundamentally tied to industry, even though they represent this kind of utopian retreat to the countryside. So we'll also again prod that idea a little bit more in the penultimate section of the exhibition, which looks at sort of the negotiation of modernity for artists and industry in Philadelphia, really following World War I into the kind of early years of the Depression. And one of our case studies here will be the Sesquicentennial exhibition held in 1926 in Philadelphia, which, as my colleague and friend Lydia Brandt likes to call, the World's Fair that time forgot. Generally considered kind of a failure before it began, wrapped up in municipal corruption, and it rained the whole time. The whole thing was a mud field. It occupies this sort of comical place in many ways in kind of Philadelphia history, but I think it's also a really wonderful kind of locus for this idea that craft revival is really bound up with modernity in many ways. So you have these government pavilions and these official pavilions that look very much like the program you see on the right, this kind of forward-looking, sort of vaguely Art Deco kind of electrically illuminated, very much of this kind of statement of the future and progress. And then at the same time, you have a full-scale sort of Disneyland recreation of Philadelphia's High Street, or what became Market Street, from the year 1776. And these were buildings that were occupiable. They were, in many cases, furnished to represent historical residences or taverns or so on. There were people in colonial period dress, kind of wandering around as sight interpreters or as hospitality workers, essentially. So you have this kind of immersive, mediated experience that's recreating the colonial past within this larger kind of spectacle of commerce and technology and modernity. And so we'll try to sort of marinate in that ambiguity a little bit and sort of show that the kind of arc of arts and crafts, as maybe the kind of popular understanding is that it sort of dies out in the 20s and 30s as Art Deco and the influx of European modernism starts to weigh upon American design and art in other ways. That's not entirely true. It persists, but it's transformed in some ways. And even within the industrial setting, you'll have a firm like Orinoco Mills in Philadelphia, a major textile firm, who looks to French Art Deco, for example, as a kind of new source of aesthetic input, but they're still really creating materials rooted in the same industrial and craft traditions that Philadelphia has been home to. And it's also a moment to think about that shifting contour of arts and crafts really away from and we're painting in broad strokes, of course, but away from the kind of collectivist spirit of those first decades of the 20th century, where the coming together in community with like-minded artisans and makers was really the whole goal, towards a much more atomized and sort of individual vision of craft. And some wonderful examples, obviously Wharton Esherick, as we heard a little bit earlier, is kind of the key hinge for a lot of this. He trains at many of the same institutions that our other protagonists frequent, but then creates this own kind of solo existence, isolated in the woods, making his things by hand, although always in community that's sort of invisible to the public eye in interesting ways. Or really, I love this object so much. This is a radio cabinet by Max Siegel, who's an immigrant iron worker who essentially gets off the boat and immediately finds employment with Samuel Yellen's shop, but then later just keeps a home forge, essentially in his backyard, and is working with iron, but also aluminum. He's, again, sort of bridging traditional and modernity in many ways. So you have a radio cabinet, right, a kind of high-tech object for its moment, but rendered in this wonderful medievalizing sort of tabernacle-like form. So really just allowing those ambiguities to sort of live and say that this doesn't need to be a kind of pat narrative of the arts and crafts loses, modernism wins, but they're always still in tension and mutually kind of reinforcing or contesting one another. And then as a coda to the exhibition, and we should note that we are sort of joined in spirit by our colleague Elizabeth Agro, Curator of Contemporary Craft at the museum, who's been working with us for the last few months to shape this sort of concluding moment of the exhibition, which will really bring the story into the present and sort of look at how artists in Philadelphia have continued to, in various ways, either carry on or, in some cases, contest and critique the legacies and the lessons of arts and crafts. And really this was motivated in some part by the closure of the University of the Arts. You know, we felt since our exhibition's narrative was so wrapped up in the history of that institution, we needed a moment to sort of acknowledge that major rupture of this sudden institutional disappearance. So many of the artists we feature here will have taught or studied at UArts, but then also the broader range of craft programs that have come to characterize Philadelphia's scene, whether Moore College of Art or the Tyler School of Art at Temple University. And just two really wonderful, spectacular objects to close us out are a stained glass window by Judith Schechter, who taught at University of the Arts and is now teaching at Tyler in the wake of that institution's closure, who really is pushing stained glass in kind of fabulous new directions. And I hope some of you were able to see her amazing exhibition at the Michener Art Museum that closed over the summer. But not only sort of experimenting technically and formally, but always responding to the history of the medium itself. And in this case is looking to the kind of biomorphism of the early 20th century, sort of Art Nouveau, Ernst Haeckel, and so on, as a way of grappling with contemporary issues around sort of ecological concerns. And in this case in particular, it's a very kind of narrative piece around the rise of the pandemic and sort of how nature was in many ways a salve during that time. Or as a kind of perfect bookend to where we began with the centennial, Roberto Lugo's All About the Benjamin Century Vase, which is a quotation of the Union Porcelain Works Century Vase shown at the centennial, you know, this kind of major statement of American arrival in the form of a ceramic. But here it's twisted, it's remixed, it's critiqued, and it's integrated with Lugo's own kind of personal biography, you know, autobiography, growing up Puerto Rican in this country, and sort of the struggles and challenges of you know how his personal journey fits within these larger national sort of narratives. So with that, I think we hopefully have a little bit of time for questions, but if we need to move on to the reception, we're very happy to chat more about the project and where it goes from here. Thank you so much.
That sounds good. I just want to say we encourage the Decorative Arts Society to visit the exhibition when it's up.